Good morning, everyone. I wanted to start by thanking Dr. Sane and Arun Bhargav for this opportunity to talk to you. And the topic today is mathematics of a happy and purposeful life. You know, a friend of mine, when he heard the topic, said, mathematics and happiness don't mix. Well, I hope I can change that perspective a little bit. Everybody wants to be happy. Hinduism, Buddhism, other religions offer paths to happiness. Maybe later we could discuss what Hinduism has to say about this. But I want to take a very practical, simple approach to happiness and to a purposeful life today. Our practical experience is that we are happy when our desires are satisfied. When we get what we want, we are happy. So, for example, right now, a thought has come into my mind. Lunchtime will be coming up soon. And the thought is, wouldn't it be really nice if I could have Srikhanda Puri for lunch today? And even the thought of this is making me happy. But my intellect has grabbed hold of this thought and it is examining it and it is saying this. It says, are you kidding me? You are trying to lose weight and you want to eat Srikhanda. So my intellect has shot down this thought. But my mind does not give up. It comes up with alternatives. And after some back and forth, my free will decides. And it says this. It says, after this thought, you go to the gym, burn 500 calories, and then you can have Srikhanda Puri for lunch. And I'm okay with that decision. So thoughts come in your mind, they get converted to desires. And if those desires are satisfied, then we feel happy. That is our standard procedure, right? That is our standard procedure. And this is what happens at the individual level. What about happiness at the society level? Let's consider, for example, a young graduate. He has just graduated graduate school, and he has two desires. One is he wants to get a fantastic job. And the second is he wants to marry his girlfriend. Now, let's say further that the probability of achieving each of these desires, let us say, is 50%, 50-50. What will happen? Well, one thing that can happen is that he may be successful in both of his desires. And the chance of that happening is 50% times 50% or 25%. So there is a 25% probability that he'll be successful in both. There is similarly a 25% probability that none of his desires will come true. And then there is a 50% chance that one of the two of his desires will actually happen. So what is the net result? The result is that a 25% chance of being extremely unhappy, a 25% chance of being very happy, and a 50% chance of being moderately happy. This is what will happen to, these are the probabilities for that individual. Now, let us suppose that there are 1,000 people like him in society. The translation would be that, roughly speaking, 250 of them would be very unhappy because nothing that they wanted came true. 250 of them will be extremely happy because both their desires got satisfied, and 500 of the 1,000 would be moderately or 50% happy, shall we say. So there is a distribution of happiness in society, right? Not everybody is equally happy. There is a big range of happiness in society. In this particular case, the average happiness in society is 50%, and the range of happiness goes from 0% happy to 100% happy. Okay. So what we want to achieve at the society level is we want to maximize average happiness. We want that 50% to become 60%, 70%, 80%, and so on. And we want the variability of happiness to reduce so that there is not a tremendous discontent in society. Those would be our objectives at the society level. Basically, the starting point is that happiness lies in satisfying desires. Swami Chinmayananda says pretty much the same thing. I hope you can see it on your screen. Here is the equation that Chinmayananda offers. He says happiness is equal to the number of desires satisfied divided by the number of desires that you have. So if you have 2 desires, the denominator is 2, and if only one of them is satisfied, the numerator is 1. So the happiness is 1 divided by 2, or 50%. Right? Very simple, straightforward equation, nothing very complicated about it. There are complications involved, but I am not going into them at this point. So the question is, what strategies can we employ to increase happiness? Well, obviously, one way to increase happiness is to increase the numerator, right? Somehow, if the number of desires satisfied becomes larger and larger and larger, of course, it will never be larger than the total number of desires you have. So if the numerator increases, our happiness will increase. But we know that there is almost no way that all our desires would be always satisfied. Right? So what Chinmayananda says is that a better approach is to reduce the denominator, is to reduce the number of desires entertained. So as the denominator reduces, happiness increases. And ultimately, if you don't have any desire at all, in other words, the denominator is 0, then happiness will become 100%. And you can understand this by knowing that if you don't have any desires, well, that situation would be very easy. In a sense, that situation would be very easy to satisfy because you have no desires to satisfy in the first place. So the happiness becomes 100%. So that is one solution, not the only solution, mind you, but one solution. What might be another solution? In this case, another solution might be to only have desires which are easy to satisfy. So there is virtually 100% chance that each of your desires would be satisfied, and then the happiness ratio would become 100%. And for some, that is life in retirement, where the number of desires might be there, but each of them is relatively easy to satisfy. So this is So this is one way in which we can increase happiness. And the point I want to make here is that twofold. One, our happiness lies in satisfying desires. And the solution that is being offered here at the moment is to have very few desires, ideally to have zero desires, in which case happiness will become maximum. So that may be a prescription if happiness is the only goal that you have in life. Should happiness be the only goal in life? You know, back in 1980 timeframe, quality had become very, very important, the subject of quality, product quality, after the advent of Japanese small cars, which in those days had tremendously high quality compared to the American cars. And every company wanted to produce something that was of a very high quality. So high quality was one goal. Now, as you can see very easily, high quality is very easy to achieve if cost doesn't matter. So you can certainly get high quality at high cost, but that is a way of bankrupting the company. So when you have a single objective, for example, like quality, then you can achieve that objective, but everything else might fall apart. So we ended up having a second objective that said, yes, we want high quality, but at a particular cost. And eventually the target became how to achieve high quality at low cost. So there were always two objectives at a minimum. In a sense, one counteracting the other. So happiness is one objective in life. Is there another? And I think there is. The other objective is to lead a purposeful life. And I'm translating for the moment that purposeful life as making contributions to society. I think all of us want to leave a slightly better world behind. That does not mean that we have to win Nobel Prizes or become prime ministers or anything like that. It could be very simple things, taking care of ourselves, taking care of our family, maybe helping friends and people around us, doing something for society, etc., etc. The idea of concentric expanding circles. It could be small contributions, but we want to do something to help society. So I'm proposing that there is a second objective in addition to happiness, which is to make contributions to society of one kind or another. Now, in order to contribute, we must act and accomplish those actions. It is not enough just to act, but to accomplish those actions. Now, what makes us act? And I think the practical experience is that it is the desire that makes us act. If I do not have a desire, for example, to jump from a plane, it is not likely to happen. So it is the desires that make us act. The success of the action is not guaranteed, but we need to have a desire to act. And the more of our desires, the more number of desires that are satisfied, assuming all the desires to be good desires, the more the number of desires that are satisfied, the greater is the contribution to society. So now you can see that if we have two objectives, One is to maximize happiness, to lead a happy life. The other is to contribute to society. Then the answers become widely different. One answer is that to be happy, we want to reduce desires. But to make contributions, we want to increase desires. We must have desires to contribute. So it is very clear that it is not going to be possible to achieve both objectives simultaneously, so long as we continue on the path that we are on. So how do you solve this problem? And one way is to translate this into a bit of mathematics and see where that leads us. So let me start here. N is the number of desires that we have. And little p is the probability of satisfying a desire. In my example of the young man, this probability was 50% for him. It doesn't have to be 50%. It could be any number between 0 and 100%. Then n multiplied by p, np, is the number of desires satisfied. So for example, suppose you have 10 desires. You have 10 things you want to achieve this year or this quarter, whatever. So n is equal to 10. Let us suppose that the probability that each of these desires would be satisfied is 30%. Then what is likely to happen is n times p, which is 10 times 30%, which is 3, right? 10 times 0.3 is equal to 3. So np is equal to 3. Chances are that 3 of the 10, on average, 3 out of those 10 desires would be satisfied. Now, in proposing this, we have made some simplifying assumptions. One is that I am assuming all the desires to be good desires. That's number one. Number two is that I have assumed that the probability of satisfying a desire is equal for all desires. That is obviously a wrong assumption. It's not completely correct, but it is not an unreasonable assumption to begin with. And perhaps the mathematics can be made to work with a more general assumption than having to assume the probability of all desires to be equal. But that is what I have assumed at the time, for the time being. And finally, it is our practical experience that as the number of desires increase, as n increases, the probability of satisfying those desires reduces, right? If we start working on 100 different things, it is not likely that we can do them all in the best possible way. And there are going to be more failures than would have been had the number of desires being smaller. So that practical aspect of it has been properly considered in the mathematics that is here, meaning that as n increases, as the number of desires increase, the probability of satisfying each of those desires reduces, as that bullet there states. So those are what is under the nomenclature are also the assumptions that I made. And now let us see what the conclusions are. One conclusion is that the average contribution the average contribution that a person makes would be n times p, namely the number of desires, the number of his desires, his or her desires satisfied. Because the contribution to the society requires satisfaction of the desire that a person has. If a person, for example, wants to contribute to making a community hall happen or a community building happen, then it is the satisfaction of desire, meaning the building of the community center, that becomes the contribution. So you have to have a desire to do it, you must work, and the desire has to be satisfactorily completed for the society to achieve benefit out of it. And that is what the number of desires satisfied means, right? So the average contribution is n times p, okay? The second equation here, which deals with variability of the contribution. Now, variability of the contribution, as we saw in the case of the young graduate, if there were 1,000 of people like that, not everybody was equally happy. There was a range of happiness. In a similar fashion, for 1,000 people in a society, there is going to be a range of contribution in that society. All are working to contribute, but not all will be equally successful, causing somebody to have large contribution and somebody else to have small contribution. And that is what the mathematics, which by the way, I have not actually taken you through, I am simply giving you the answers. That is what this second equation is saying, which is saying that the variability of contributions, the range of contribution, is given by 1 divided by the square root of the number of desires satisfied, NP. The conclusion here is that as the number of desires satisfied increases, 2 things happen. The average contribution increases, and that's almost self-evident. You don't need mathematics for that. But interestingly, the variability of contribution reduces because that NP is in the denominator. So increasing the number of desires satisfied means greater contribution to society and a more equitable contribution on the part of members of the society. Less variability in terms of contribution from person to person. As far as equation number 3, average happiness, you see here that 3 of the 4 equations that I have listed depend upon the number of desires satisfied, n times p. And if I increase n times p, what happens? Average contribution goes up, the variability of contribution goes down, and the variability of happiness, which is the 4th equation here, the variability of happiness also goes down, meaning that as NP increases, the discrepancy between the differences between happiness from person to person reduce, right? They reduce, which is a good thing. So 3 good things happen when n times p increases, when the number of desires satisfied increases, which obviously means that you must have desires to begin with. And you should have a reasonably large number of desires so that n times p is large, right? N times p cannot become infinity, cannot continue to increase because of this assumption, which says that as n increases, p reduces. And the product n times p comes to some constant value. It does not continue to increase. Okay. So the conclusion at the moment is that increasing n times p is a good thing. We want the number of desires satisfied to be large. But what about this equation right here? Happiness. Happiness is not a function of n times p. It is a function of p, which is the probability of satisfying a desire. And we have already seen that the probability of satisfying a desire increases as the number of desires reduce. In particular, the probability of satisfying a desire is 100% if you don't have any desires at all. If n is 0. But if n is 0, n times p is also 0, which was the problem we had brought up earlier, which is that it is not possible to maximize happiness and to maximize contribution to society simultaneously. Until we change something. Until we change something. Now, the assumption that we have made is that I start with some number of desires, n. There is a probability of satisfying each of these desires, as a result of which n times p desires are satisfied, and those desires that are satisfied become contribution to society, assuming all desires to be good desires. That part of the equation, that part of mathematics cannot be changed, because society views contribution to itself only when the desires that people have are satisfied, and it becomes a contribution. So the contribution equation cannot be changed, which leaves us with happiness equation. And our happiness equation was that we are happy when our desires are satisfied. That equation has got to change. If that equation does not change, if that thinking pattern does not change, we have no way of being extremely happy and contribute to a large extent simultaneously. So we need to give up on that happiness equation. So we want to replace happiness being a function of satisfying desires by something else other than satisfying desires, but something else that is very easy to satisfy. So let me give an example. Let us suppose, for example, that I think of my parents as effectively being God-like. Suppose I think of that, which is actually true. And let us suppose for a minute, and this is not true, but let us suppose for a minute that my father gave me a gold key, right here, a gold key, with the idea that as long as I have this key with me, I will be happy. And let us say that I have convinced myself of this, that as long as I keep that key with me, there is nothing that can happen that will make me unhappy. So what have I done? I have changed my happiness equation, which previously was satisfy a desire. I have changed it from satisfying a desire to this idea that I will have this one key with me, and as long as I have that key, I am happy. So it is an easy desire to satisfy, keeping the key with me, and so I am perennially happy, and I can continue to work, whether that work comes to fruition or it doesn't come to fruition doesn't really matter. It doesn't affect my happiness at any rate. And I continue to make contributions to society. So what we have done here is we have decoupled the happiness equation and the contribution equation. Okay. This, what I just said, to me, it seems this is just like Bhakti Marg. In Bhakti Marg, at a very simple level, we simply say that I am happy as long as I am with my God, whatever the personal God happens to be. If I can pray to that God every day, let us say, that is where my happiness lies. So if you have faith, you are decoupling. You're not saying that happiness is a function of satisfying desires, but rather a function of being able to pray to God, right? So that is one path that Hinduism has offered to this problem. Another one is the karma marg, which says you continue to work to make these contributions to society, but do not put your happiness in terms of satisfying desires. In other words, it doesn't say don't have any desires. It is saying have desires, good desires. Continue to work hard on the satisfaction of those desires, making those actions come true. But do not put your happiness, don't tie your happiness to the results, to successful results. Right? If we are able to do that, we are decoupling these equations. And what is interesting about it is, and this is a point that has not necessarily been discussed in Bhagavad Gita, at least as far as the Karma Yoga part, to my knowledge, it may have been there, but I'm not aware of it, which is that this idea, this path of the karma path, will in fact end up with these results as far as the variability of contribution and the variability of happiness. In other words, if you follow this karma path, it is saying not only that the contributions will increase, but the variability of contributions from people to people will in fact reduce. Right? So that is, to me, a slightly interesting result that comes about in this particular case. So let me kind of stop here by saying that these ideas basically say that at the society level, if we are able to implement them in our life, it will lead to a large GDP, the gross domestic product, which is the result of the contribution that each one of us makes, would be large, right? Because the average contribution is large. The gross domestic happiness, GDH, would also increase if we do not tie our happiness to the results, as Bhagavad Gita says. And in addition to that, the variability of happiness and the variability of contributions from person to person within the society that variability will in fact reduce. Three good things will happen if we follow this approach. Right? So I'm going to stop here, look for your comments and questions and so on. We have not covered the topics of what does Hinduism say about all this, what in fact is Karma Yoga, what is the role of government and political systems in making all this happen, etc., etc. But let me stop here. If you have any questions, comments, and so forth.
Okay, what I was saying is I hear you. I appreciate your presentation. I enjoyed it, but I think that's exactly where you're probably headed down the road, is that by increasing the activity of an individual, and as long as you don't keep happiness as the only goal that you have in your mind, giving your best and not worrying about the outcome, that will increase the happiness in your mind. So I think that's exactly what Sri Krishna says in 247, saying that as long as you do your best or do your job without expecting specific outcome, that may be happiness or anything else, you should be satisfied. You should keep particular goal to be achieved. That goal may be outcome, may be positive, or outcome could be happiness. I think that's exactly what Sri Krishna says. I think I hear you, I understand it. I think you're on the right track. I'm with you. Okay.
Yes, that's right. I think, we end up relatively close to 247 in Bhagavad Gita without having to invoke Brahman, Atman, Tattvamasi, or anything to do with any religion, and simply using a practical approach. And so that, I think, is a potentially for those for some people an advantageous kind of an approach, that you are not required to have faith in things that you don't necessarily understand.
Thank you, Anand. Very nice. Something that I'm trying to incorporate into your framework. Sri Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, for a karma yogi, to be a karma yogi, you have to offer everything as a service to God, Ishvara Arpana Buddhi. So the idea of having Ishvara is there in karma yoga. Otherwise, it's not yoga. And then he also says that we should accept the result as a prasada buddhi, as a gift from grace from God.
Yes.
I'm trying to incorporate these two definitions, these two parts, definition of karma yoga into your thing. You've essentially dismissed God in your equations. I'm trying to put God back in.
Yes. Yes. So, I mean, you have hit upon exactly what I think is the difference between this approach and Bhagavad Gita. Here, the only assumption that we are making is that the desires that you have are good desires, I said. Okay. Now, good is a very interesting, adjective there. What does good mean? And that could be a very long discussion, I suppose. But we all have some feel for what good means. Good does not, in my mind, does not mean everything's selfish. Is not my idea of good at any rate. That I win and everybody else loses, that to me is not good. I mean, other people might have other ideas. So something about a positive way of life does come into picture when we say that you have desires of making a positive contribution to society. So that aspect is there, although God is not invoked. And also, it is not saying that everything must be selfless service. Service, yes, because service is making contributions to society, working toward contributions. But I have never said in this approach that it has to be selfless. As Mahatma Gandhi points out, nishkama karma, he says. So to me, remember, this is intended to be a practical approach, not a Hinduism approach. So to me, if somebody says, here is $20 million, let's build a community center, and I'll give you the money as long as you put my name on it. Well, it's service to society, for sure. Is it selfless? Not completely so. Obviously, there is some selfishness involved, but it doesn't make it bad. Compared to taking no action, taking a slightly selfish action, to me is okay. Now, why would I go to a selfless action? Again, this is a discussion at the practical level, not in terms of karma philosophy and next time whether you would, this will happen or that will happen in our next birth. I'm not at the moment getting into any of that. But at the practical level, the question is, we want that community center as a community. Which way are we going to get it? Faster, better, whatever. Is it going to be by accepting this proposition, or is it going to be for waiting around for 10 years, collecting money in the first place? So all those practical issues have to come into play. And it isn't exactly clear to me necessarily that waiting for a selfless solution is better than accepting the selfish one. So that's where I was in terms of God and selfishness.
Hello. Thank you, Anandji. I really enjoyed your talk and it makes sense. This is Prabhat. My name is Prabhat Tekriwal. So I had a three-part comment actually, and one of them is already covered by Dr. Prasanna Kumar and also Dr. Sane, I would say, which is about surrender and also do not resort to inaction 247 or 1866, Iswara Prasad Buddhi and Arpan Buddhi together. So two comments that I have, additional comments. When you are trying to optimize or maximize not only the total contribution to the society, but also the variability by each individual, minimize the variability. Does that point to, just a thought, I'm not giving any answer, communism, so to speak, so that's one thought that transpired my mind when you were talking. Yes. And the second additional comment that I want to share, actually open up actually for everybody to reflect, and that is, the approach in the Gita or the Hinduism, is it perhaps individualistic in nature, meaning individual oriented, meaning the instructions are how you can attain whatever you want to attain, moksha included or happiness included, with everything in your own control, so to speak, rather than in a diversified way as a society, as a member of the community that is large, community is of course larger than a member. So could that provide some clue to some of the enigma that you left us at the end, so to speak? So those are the two thoughts that came to my mind. Of course, we have to think more.
What were the two again? One is the individual, the last question.
Right, the last one. Yeah, the first one is does it point out to communism? Yeah, right.
Right.
Since you
Right.
talked about GDP and that is in context of course, maximizing the total contribution to the society, assuming that it's a good intentions, right?
Right.
As you pointed out, and also reducing the variability.
Yes.
Communism kind
So,
of,
right.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. So we haven't, as I mentioned, we have not covered the topics that some of you have brought up. We have not talked about what Hinduism says, besides saying 247. We have not talked in detail about what karma yoga actually is, as opposed to the path of karma. And we have not talked about what is the role of government and political systems in making this happen. And your comment regarding communism deals in that arena, right? The fact, well, communism has that. I'm no expert on political systems, but my understanding is that communism does want to reduce the disparity from people to people, so to speak. Here, what we are saying is that the mathematics is telling us that the mere act of trying to contribute to society to the fullest extent automatically reduces disparity. It is not that we are doling out money to poor people or this or that. It is that if all of us are able to contribute, have good thoughts, and they may be completely different thoughts from you, may want to do something totally different than what I want to do. But as long as we are pulling toward that direction, that itself reduces the variability in contribution and variability in happiness both. So it is not a communist philosophy, or the approach is certainly capitalist approach, which is saying, keep on working, do the best you can, take lots of actions. And if everybody did that, the mathematics basically ends up, and I'll be happy to send a paper that I've written on it to anybody that, if you want, I can, please let me know, that automatically says that differences between people will reduce in terms of their contributions and happiness, both, if they are allowed to, if governments and others don't put roadblocks into their into their ability to achieve things. And that is primarily then the role of government, is to eliminate these roadblocks. In the old days in India, it was very difficult, for example, to go to a government office and get anything done. Well, that's a roadblock. Now, if that can be removed, people will be able to increase their contribution. People will be happier. I mean, that's so easy to see, it's almost. So
there's an example, Anand. For example, the Habitat for Humanity,
yes,
where people contribute their skills, a carpenter,
yes,
electrician,
yes,
a mason,
yeah,
they all want to contribute.
Yes.
And individually, they're happy because they're contributing, and society benefits
Absolutely.
because their contribution
Yes.
is not selfish.
Right.
It is really that nothing to do with communism. It's a collective
Yes.
thought and a group of people to do certain things.
Right. So now coming to, for example, Hinduism. Hinduism, and there are experts on Hinduism here in this audience, but to my knowledge, Hinduism kind of says this. It says that if you have desires, that automatically means that you are an inadequate person. Because if you were totally adequate and satisfied, you would not have any desires. You would be satisfied within yourself. So, and why is that happening? Why do you have this sense of inadequacy? Because you are ignorant. You don't understand who you really are. You are Atman. You are not this body, mind, intellect, and so forth. You are Atman. same as Brahman. If you only understood that, what would that mean? Everything, every object in this world is within Brahman. You are that. In a manner of speaking, you already have everything that you desire because you desire objects. I want a fancy car, I want a great house, whatever it is. Everything is in Brahman and you already got it. If you understood that you are Brahman, you would be very happy because all your desires are already satisfied.
No.
So this is bliss, right? At least this is my way of thinking about what Ananda means in Sat Chit Anand. So, but I do not know of a single person. That is not to say that these people do not exist. Who, it is one thing to understand the philosophy intellectually, and it is completely different thing to actually believe it, act according to it, etc. So if you can do that, great, power to you and no question about it. But if you cannot, I mean, you have to ask yourself, out of the 8 billion people on this earth, how many of them, number one, even understand this at any level, and how many of those can practice it? If that answer is close to 0, then you need, I think, in my view, a different approach. It is not that people don't want to be happy, that people don't want to contribute, but they may not be able to grab on to this notion of Brahman and Atman and Tattvamasi, etc., etc. Need a little different approach, something practical that they can say, yeah, I behave that way. I am happy when I get stuff and I am not happy when I don't get it. So you start with that. You probably come to the same similar answers, but in a way that they might be able to grab onto and practice. That was my hope.
So that's why I call it a journey forever. When you say, not to say that those people exist, perhaps not also because everybody is at a different point in that journey that is going to last forever, so to speak. And that kind of, relates to, the karma and the reincarnation theory and all that, because that journey continues. So that if we take that notion in our mind in consideration, that this journey is going to last forever, meaning it just keeps on, then that kind of little bit gives us a positive feeling in terms of the answer that you're asking for. My second point I don't want to forget though, is the communism we all addressed here, right? The second point that I was making is
individual.
Is Gita or the Hinduism approach individual based, meaning what an individual can do rather than definitely as a society or as a mass?
Okay, I got two things that come to mind. One is that if all individuals followed Gita, then of course it's a society level automatically. That's one. The second is that the karma philosophy, which is an example of, at least as usually explained, is an example of individual level activity. It is typically explained as the reincarnation, the destiny, self-effort, reincarnation. Those are things that come into the explanation of karma philosophy. It is Jivatma taking repeated births and and each birth being faced with a destiny Destiny meaning whatever happens to that individual, which is a function of his previous actions, right? Previous karma. And then the way he deals with whatever comes his way, and I'm using the word his in a general way, it is her, etc. Whatever comes his way, the self-action that the person takes, right, determines his future. And what will happen in future lives, etc., etc. So that is the standard explanation, which is happening as you have pointed out, or in your question, at the individual level, right? That's happening at the individual level. So it is almost saying, you are by yourself. Okay? You are by whatever is happening to you, don't blame anybody else. You did something in the past and you deserve what is happening to you, both good and bad, right? So if something bad happens to me, I am supposed to think that I must have done something either in this life, in the past, years gone by, or if not there, then in my previous lives. This is karma, part of karma philosophy. Okay. In my view, this is quite wrong. We know from personal experience that everything that is happening to us, very large proportion of what is happening to us is because of other things. Okay. It is not just, it cannot be, the chance of my being eaten alive by a lion has gone down tremendously over the last few 100 years. Why is that? Is that because I did something to get rid of lions in this life or in my previous life, or is it that a whole bunch of people did something? Right? It is obvious that everything that happens to us, whether it is COVID or anything else, is not the doing of my own jivatma, either in this life or in previous lives. So this, and similarly, the actions that we can take against it. For example, probably nobody on this call, developed the vaccine that saved a bunch of people. It is not our doing. It's definitely not the doing of any of us in our previous lives, because this question did not even arise, in those lives. So to say that karma philosophy or anything else is individual, it is my opinion, is a wrong statement. And we must include systemic karma. We can talk at some other point there about systemic karma and what does that mean in terms of eventual liberation. But I do not believe, I believe that all of us are connected, and those connections must be taken into account in the karma philosophy that our religion offers.
Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam.
Yes.
Yes. So yes, you already mentioned that one, just to accentuate your point only, maybe 3-4 weeks ago, I had shared in Dr. Sani's talk, wise function of 3 sets of axes, several axes. So 3 sets of axes. One axis that one set of axes is that, I know about them, they are in my control and I act on them. Second set of axes could be that, I know about them, but they are not in my control. There is yet the third set of axes that are the, environmental variables, as you're pointing out. They also affect the result of my doing. So, and I think that's what you're also saying. Just wanted to add that, that's all.
Yeah, I
In
think
a
that's
in a mathematical terms, because you're talking mathematics today, in the same spirit.
yes. I mean, what you have brought up there is a topic in statistics, in product development called robust design. What you just
Yes.
said is the fundamental of robust design.
Yes, I teach that actually.
Oh, you do. So no wonder that you are bringing it up,
Yeah.
and so you have factors in your control, factors outside your control, factors outside your control that are external factors, and factors that are internal factors, etc., etc. And the entire so-called Taguchi method
Yes.
is based upon that. And it'll be interesting sometime to talk about it and to relate it to how do we achieve a sthita prajna position. This notion of sthita prajna, which is that you are not going to be affected by things that happen, is exactly, in my view again, is exactly the same as the idea of developing a robust product. So we are talking about designing a human being slightly differently, making ourselves slightly differently, so that we don't get affected by what other people say or what happens around us, which are noise factors in your language of robust design, right?
Yes.
So that is another topic that one could get into.
Anand, I want to just put a couple of points out.
Okay.
Can you hear? We have discussed it, but I would like to hear what other people have to say about it. And okay, all right. Okay, so a couple of things. Those were when we do not think about the results and we do our actions, we do our karma and not worry about the results. If our actions are not getting us to the goal that we want to achieve, then we have to think about it and change the actions without knowing if we are, it is just keep doing the actions and not achieving the goal is also waste of time and efforts. So there also has to be awareness which actions are going to take me to achieving the goals. So it's kind of bringing little science to it. And the second thing was being very satisfied with oneself, achieving that Satchit Ananda. So if I were to go in Himalayas and I'm very happy with myself, but the world is suffering, shouldn't I be using my time and my energy and my efforts to really reduce the suffering of other people rather than sitting somewhere being very happy? I feel I would work on helping others, and when my body is not able to do anything, that time maybe I should say I should be happy with myself and not worry about other things. That's the way. What do other people have to, because we have talked about it, right, Anand? Two of us have discussed this.
Yeah, people may have opinions on it.
Yeah, I would like to hear what they have to say about this.
One thought that comes to my mind is that even if we do not achieve the intended result, the intended why, because of your X's, just using the same spirit of math again, but whatever you have achieved, that also is a stopgap achievement, so to speak, because that will fuel further research. So it is kind of, think of that a building block. So certainly if you have the time left in your own life, you meaning me or anybody, then you learn from it and then you change your course, as you kind of pointed out yourself. But also, even if I don't have the time or whatever resource, then somebody else can be using that learning. And it can be even if it's a negative result, that is still useful, because then that will prevent somebody else perhaps not to take the same path. We talk about the butterfly effect. Somewhere in the jungle of Amazon, little butterfly flutters its wings, and that effect is shown in the entire universe. And we are not able to see it, feel it, but then the effect is there. So in that sense, I would take, that's one thought. That's the thought that comes to my mind, in terms of changing the course or making so meaning we should not be dissatisfied, so to speak, even
Okay,
though
so
we did not attain the intended results.
The
Oh.
basic assumption you have is that if desires are fulfilled, person will be happy.
Yes.
But when we see in the world, people in affluent society, they have everything. Their desires in terms of, their needs are fulfilled, but then still they're unhappy.
Yes.
There is a void in the mind, which needs to be filled. Needs to be filled with something. So, and people are filling it with so many things. Some of us just watch TV, news, social media, some do drugs, some do alcohol, some do things. And it's so that void to be filled with the right thing is a necessity. And that without that, people will not be happy. So no matter what we can do in mathematics, if we don't fill that void with, say, something dharmic, some philosophy, or something to do with, selfless service or God or anything. Without that, people will not be happy. So even if we keep saying, okay, do a desire, do the karma, either they don't have time for anything else, then they're fine. But when there's emptiness, people reach that, all the affluent society reach at that level. And once they reach it, the mind needs to be filled with something for people to be happy. That's what my point is. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. I think the reason, I mean, there has been a survey made for the last, I think, 100 years. I'm not sure. I have not gone through it to really understand properly. But the survey seems to suggest that the relative happiness in this world has not changed, in the sense that, you would think that people had so little 100 years ago compared to what we have today, right? Today we are, even in Minnesota, we are sitting at 72 degrees all year around, regardless of what is happening outside. And that certainly was not possible 100 years ago. So things have improved a lot, but people's happiness has not, according to that survey. And I think that has to do with the fact that happiness is a function of relative entity. It is not absolute, right? If happiness was measured on an absolute scale, we should have been very, very happy by now compared to those that lived 100 years ago. But we are not, because we always compare ourselves to the guy next door, not to the people that lived 100 years ago. So happiness is relative. So that's one aspect of the problem here. The second is that I am at least convinced, and Bhagavad Gita says it, but I am also convinced that as long as I continue to think that I will be happy if my desire is satisfied, as long as I tie my happiness to the satisfaction of the desire, life is going to be more miserable than it needs to be. Because not everything I want, I'm going to get. I know that. Quite a number of those things are not even in my hands to get. So I'm giving the key to my happiness to somebody else. And that's a very bad thing to do. So we know that as long as we persist in that thinking, But I had to start it there because most people think that way. So I wanted to take the topic where people are and then take it to a place where we are saying, don't do it that way. Do we need to fill the void? I am not sure. And do we need to fill it in particular with any particular religion or anything else? I am definitely not sure of that. But the very fact that one could continue to work on something good should fill the void. There would not be too many voids left if one actually took actions like that. That's what I think.
One more thing I wanted to share with you, Anandji, when you made that assumption, that assuming that, our intentions are good, meaning our contributions are positive for the society. I kind of want to relax that assumption requirement, because even though we can perceive something as bad, such as Corona, or somebody is going to really loot my property or something, a docket, so to speak. But then even in that action, that sets up something that's positive afterwards. So each and every entity in this entire nature or Brahman or the universe has a unique role to play. And that unique role, that in that uniqueness, some of the things can be negative. After all, life is nothing but our continual movement towards seeking that balance, seeking that equilibrium. For if there was that balance to be achieved, there will be no life. Everything will be stand still, basically done. So it is because the rajas dominates or certain part of the inequilibrium is in existence, that really results into this life. And then we talk about it and we try to improve. So that's, I wanted to relax that requirement actually. Intentions, sure, we will start with positive intentions, but even if it turns out to be negative for the moment, for the time being, because who are we to judge? And that's why I would not judge that Shankaracharya had moksha or he was a realized person or Vivekananda was so, because every entity is in the journey. A journey is forever, so to speak. So I'll abstain myself from judgment, about myself or about anybody else.
Well,
Anand,
yes.
just to comment before I sign off. One of them, I always understood Bhagavad Gita telling me, kshetre dharma kuru. In whatever field that you are engaged in, do the best you can in that field.
Yes.
Secondly, let me close with Henry Longfellow's comment, do thy duty that is best, leave unto thy Lord the rest.
Yes. Right. Can I just, close with one thing here, which is from Bhagavad Gita. Here is 247, 248, chapter 2, Karma Yoga. So if you look at it, this is the translation that I found in some reputable commentaries on Bhagavad Gita. You have control over your actions, but not on their fruits. That is a statement of fact. It is nothing to do with philosophy. It's obvious. We all know that. Let not the fruit of action be your motive, nor let your attachment be to inaction.
Yeah.
Right? I agree with line number 4 here, which is saying, which is basically saying in simple words, it is saying act. Act. That's line number 4 on this.
Do something.
And do something. And in fact, in 248, it makes it very clear, perform actions. renouncing attachments. By that, it means renouncing attachments to the fruits of actions.
Yeah.
Being the same in success and failure.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
So much
This
more.
this is what we, even from a mathematical point of view, this is what basically the same conclusions we came to. My only disagreement, maybe it is a strong word, but my only disagreement is to line number 3, which says, let not the fruit of action be your motive. I disagree with this statement, because I believe that step 1 is to figure out what you want to achieve. Whether you achieve it or not is another question, but what you want to achieve is step number 1. That is your motive. You are trying to achieve something. And then you figure out what actions are necessary to achieve it. Then you basically work on those actions without constantly thinking about, hey, wouldn't it be really great if I got there? Or what will happen if I didn't get there, etc., etc. Focus on the actions that you want to do, right? Without, because the fruits, whether your actions are going to succeed or not, is not in your control completely. To some degree it is, but not fully, right? That is what we do. To say that let not the fruit of action be your motive, I personally disagree.
Anand,
Yes.
enjoyed it. Just a couple of comments. Stay on the third line now. I think you have to look at the line in a different way.
Okay.
Let not the specific fruit of action be your motive. That is where most of the commentators have not fully explained it. If you have a specific outcome will come about, and that's your motive, and you insist on that, then you find unhappiness. You give your best. At the same time, accept the outcome, because there are so many intangibles that you cannot predict or understand. And whatever the outcome comes out after giving your best efforts, find contentment. Because happiness, you have to take a step further. Without the contentment, you're not going to be at peace.
Okay. So
A question of the thing is, you got 3 Shakti: Ichha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, and Kriya Shakti. All of them are given to us. But desire is, no action takes place, Anand, without having a desire. You're absolutely right. Only thing that 247 is emphasizing us is that let not be a specific outcome will come having given my best effort. If that is your motive, you may be surprised that the outcome may not be exactly what you expect. And if that inadequate outcome that you were expecting, if that gives you unhappiness, just as Jaya mentioned, make change if you want next time. And even after giving all possible chances, whatever outcome comes, accept the fact that there's so many intangibles that our human mind cannot understand, accept them as it is, and find contentment in that, and you'll be happy. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, I think perhaps we are all trying to say the same thing in our own words, but I would replace this line number 3 here with this line.
Yeah.
Which is a simple statement that we take something complex and then we try to explain, well, what does that mean? Well, don't tie your happiness to the result. Well, why don't we just say that?
Only one thing, you should add one more word to that. Neither tie your happiness to specific fruits of action. That's what I'm saying. You say, I'm not disagreeing with you, but your line is fine. But specific fruits of action, then I think we're on the same page. Because you do not have control on specific fruits, and that's where the unhappiness comes.
Well, yeah, I mean, you are going to get some fruits possibly.
Oh, absolutely.
But it may be a disaster
Exactly.
right? It may be a disaster.
The thing is, you may not get Srikhanda today, Anand,
Exactly.
but it may be
Exactly.
Basundi instead. That's okay.
Well, yeah, but I could get something else totally.
Exactly. So find happiness and be contented with it.
So that's what this is saying. Don't try your, I mean, we can add the word specific, but that's what I meant.
Yeah, I understand. But don't forget to go to exercise now.
Don't try your happiness to, I mean, neither try your happiness to fruits of action, nor let your attachment be to inaction. Because it is easy to say, let's forget about, I don't even need to do anything.
Dr. Sane, I like your this thought that if you have to change the course, you can do that. But then whatever the fruits are there, like even if you don't get what you want, still be then satisfied with whatever may come. I think that's a good compromise position. I like that. And by the way, Shrikhanda is ready in the refrigerator. So just so you guys know.
Okay. Take a carton, send it here.
Okay. And another question to people who are knowledgeable in this in Hinduism, all of you are, that what do you think about this thing, that if I'm in Himalaya and I'm very happy and I can spend my life there, or I say I am happy with myself, but I cannot see unhappiness of other people, so I must come down and help others. I do need some input on that. Can anybody say anything about it?
I think you have to remember everybody's capacities to do that. So that even though your attitude is altruistic, you have to remember that some people can do it, some people cannot. For example, last time we talked about Doctors Without Borders. Somebody is sick. As a physician, if my health is good and I can travel, of course, yes, even if I'm in Himalayas, I'll go there. At the same time, if I'm not a physician or my physical health does not permit it, I'm not going to be crying about it because I cannot accept the things as they are.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to say, depending upon the situation. But again, the key is not simply happiness. And Anand is so right, but you have to take one step. Thevile anante taise chi rahave. Find the contentment in everything you do. No, give your best. Don't do without any action. You have to do the best as you can. Change your course if you need to, because that's a part of growing up and advancing. But then after giving your best, asking for the help from others, whatever outcome comes, accept it, because there's so many intangible factors on which you do not have control, and find happiness and be contented.
Okay, thank you.
I agree.
Yes.